Hello, everybody. I'm seeing people coming in. We'll just give people 2 or 3 minutes to join us, and then we'll get started. Hopefully you can see my first screen, and the eagle-eyed among you will notice it says 3 o'clock. No, we're starting at 1 o'clock. Just give people another couple of minutes and then we'll get started with today's webinar. Okay, the number coming in seems to have reached a limit, so we'll get started. The way this is going to operate is I'm going to talk to you with some slides, so a PowerPoint presentation to give you an overview of the program, and then we'll open up to some Q&A. Because of the Zoom format we're using, we need you to chat your questions into the question box, and then the power behind the throne, Lucy is going to be managing those, and she'll feed them to me at the end in groups, and we'll endeavour to answer all your questions. So this is a webinar where we're going to talk about HCRI's International Disaster Management Humanitarian Response Distance Learning MSc. I'm assuming things are going to work. What I'm going to do is give you a little bit about HCRI at the University of Manchester, the Humanitarian Conflict Response Institute, a little bit of the background to IDM HR and our online programs more generally, give you a little bit about what you'll study while you're with us, what's involved and how it works. Try to run that through in about half an hour, and then we'll open it for questions. So first of all, I want to start a little bit about HCRI and its origins. It's now into its 13th year, lucky 13. It was formed in 2008 in response to a demand for a centre that looks at humanitarian action. The aspiration was to bring together academics, practitioners, policymakers to look at crisis response on a global scale. And some of the parties that came together in 2008 were involved in the Chengdu earthquake and in some of the disaster response to the conflicts in sub-Saharan Africa. Those were the principal themes that were coming together, but our remit is a global one, and our reach in is to the United Nations and into WHO in Geneva. And as we talk through, you'll get a flavour of our links to the UN agencies, particularly focused around Geneva, and some of our partnerships with Johns Hopkins and the Centre for Humanitarian Studies in Geneva, and with the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm. We are social responsibility in action. Those of you who've been looking at the University of Manchester in the last few weeks will have seen that the Times Higher Education Supplement has come out and said University of Manchester globally is #1. We're very proud of it, for our social responsibility being stitched through everything the university stands for. But 13 years ago, HCRI was the start of this social responsibility action with its multidisciplinary nature, bringing together medicine, science, social science, the humanities together. We are an institute, a research institute that's shared between the Faculty of Humanities and the Faculty of Biology, Medicine and Health. We are part of the University of Manchester, but administratively, we sit within the School of Arts, Languages and Culture, and that's just about who manages our budgets and who looks after our research, etc. But we bring together humanitarian aid, disaster management, conflict response, and health, all under this one banner. Our disciplinary strengths reflect that. Our immediately outgoing director, Bertrand Taithe, is a modern historian, and that's largely why we are in SALC at the moment. But we have anthropologists, sociologists, politics, international relations. Our second professor is a professor of peace and conflict studies. Drama studies has a major part to play in some of the cultural and social post-conflict environments, and geography is a big part of the disaster management agenda. But equally, from an operational perspective, are the applied sciences with emergency medicine and global health. That's my lens here. Epidemiology, nursing, development studies, I alluded to peace studies, and humanitarian education, and more of that, partly why we're doing these online programs, but education and humanitarian education is also part of our distance learning suite of programs. We have a unique selling point. We were early implementers, we were early to this. It's a dynamic environment and it's evolving. The professionalization of humanitarian practice and of disaster response has been happening over the last, well, people would say 3 decades, but it's really come to the fore following the Haiti earthquake in 2010. And the pictures of the 3 people you see there, Bertrand Taithe, a historian who's been on the front foot, recognizing how important it is to be developing programs. Tony Redmond next. Quite a lot of what we do from a health perspective comes from Tony. And Ronnie Broman, who was president of MSF, and these were the names that were part of the creation of HCRI in 2008. Ronnie and Tony are now retired. Bertrand's been at the head for 13 years, and he's stepping back as of September this year to allow the Institute to go onwards and upwards, but he's too young to retire yet. We're dynamic. We're trying to keep up with and drive the agenda. We're responding to the need, but we're also actually doing it. We share a corridor with UK Med. UK Med is the emergency medical team, the international disaster response from the UK government. As I've heard it described in what was DFID, NHS PLC. How does the UK health system project itself out to support people in crisis around the world? And this picture from BBC News is part of UK Med's deployment to Typhoon Haiyan in 2013. We're actually, many of our students are deploying or have deployed. Many of our academics have been involved in research around the deployments funded by UK government into locations around the world. So we are responding to the need and we're involved in those deployments. Tony Redmond, I mentioned 2010 as being a trigger point. The catastrophic response to the earthquake in Haiti resulted in WHO saying we need a new way of health responding. and Tony chaired the WHO Emergency Medical Teams Initiative that created the current WHO EMT programs. So we are right around the table in creating the disaster response. In terms of our online presence, the MSc in Global Health, which is what brought me into HCRI, has been around since 2013. Our MSc in Humanitarian Practice in partnership with the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine and predominantly with MSF started in 2018. And our MSc, the source of our conversation today, started last year, and our first students are going to be moving into the second year. In fact, have just moved into their second year in February of this year, because it's twice yearly recruitment. The first students are now in their second year with us. Our aspiration is that anything that we teach on campus, we have an undergraduate program and we have 2 master's programs on campus. And our aspiration is any modules that we deliver on campus are also available online. And we're trying to increase our flexibility. What I'm going to present to you today is very much a template that was approved by the university, but we are moving to a core modules with flexibility for students. I'm going to present you the core framework that if you signed up from September, you would be undertaking. But my aspiration is that as you get into the program, you would have more flexibility and you'd be able to choose programs from across the HCRI suite. But I need to present you what it looks like, baseline 101 program today. But over the next year or two, because this program is evolving, you will get that flexibility. And I'm sure there'll be some questions around that. So why disaster management? Why humanitarian response? It's our USP. Why are we so passionate about it? If you go to the textbooks, in chapter 1, it will talk to you about the disaster management cycle. I don't know any of your backgrounds, and I'm going to assume they're very limited, although that's likely to be very unfair, and draw your attention to the fact disasters are not unexpected. I was involved with the UK Department of Health in its flu planning in 2007, 2008, before swine flu in 2009. For those of you based in the UK, I was sat around the table with names that you will recognise: Jonathan Van Tam, Yvonne Doyle, Department of Health Planning for COVID. But we were doing this preparedness back in the late noughties, and we've now experienced it. We could debate how well it's been done, but there was a lot of investment in preparing pre-impact. Then there's the response when the disaster happens. And then there's the recovery. And we could debate whether we're now moving from response into recovery phase. And certainly in my operational NHS role in the hospitals, we are now starting to deal with the fact that for 15 months, an awful lot of standard NHS care has not been able to be delivered. And we need to look at how we can try and get back on the front foot and recover the system. And then we go to prevention. What about next time? And if you've been watching your Twitter feeds, you will see that at the World Health Assembly that happened a couple of weeks ago in Geneva, the annual WHO get-together, they were talking about how they can get on the front foot and whether they're going to fund a pandemic preparedness or watch system that will be globally funded under a WHO banner to try not, I hate the phrase learn from the past, because we evidently don't learn the lessons, but to try use what we have recognized and be better prepared for the next pandemic, which is coming at some point in the future. And this cycle is a constantly cycling disaster cycle. That's disaster management. When you talk to people about disaster management, there are the iconic disasters: Hurricane Irma, Typhoon Haiyan, the Haitian earthquake, Hurricane Katrina. These are natural disasters, but are they truly natural? There's a man-made component to these. Haiti had a man-made component. Katrina certainly had a man-made component. These are the iconic disasters that people coming, certainly our undergrads come and think, this is what I'm going to learn about. Yeah, they will, but there is also a huge wider issue. This is pulled from an IDMC report about global displacement. These circles, the size of the circles, give you an idea of the size of the population that's displaced, the colour, whether they're internally displaced or they're internally displaced people or they're refugees because they've crossed an international border. But you can see across the globe, there is a huge displaced people challenge. This is not a sudden crisis. This is a gradual, evolving crisis. And then people suddenly wake up and think, where did this come from? We've known it's there. This was from 2019, because there's always a lag time before these things are produced. I can tell you right now that there is a crisis, there is a genocide evolving in Tigray at the moment. The Sahel is going to come to the fore over the next 12, 18 months, and we will start to see those circles appearing on these graphics in the next year or two. We can see them coming. We can mitigate. We can try get in front of the curve and try prevent the crisis being as catastrophic as it would otherwise be. And preparing for this, recognizing this, is part of disaster management and humanitarian response. There are also some unique challenges. If you look at Syria, there's a huge displaced Syrian population in Turkey, in Jordan, in the Lebanon. But 20% of the population of Lebanon at the moment is actually displaced Syrians. And they're not living in your traditional refugee camps. They're in the urban areas. They're living on the streets. How do you get to those people? How do you separate those people from the people who were living there before? Should you separate those people? Your healthcare challenge is intermingled, interdispersed. How do you manage? And there's a huge amount of research, a huge amount of change and evolution in how we deal with these displaced populations in urban and unique challenges. Yes, there are rural disasters, and climate change is a huge part of this. But it's not simple. And it's not just flooding. We've also got slow onset disasters such as drought and linkages to migration and environmental change. I've done a fair bit of work with the Somalian famine in 2013. The world could see that coming and didn't respond. Huge complexities because NGOs were trying to help, but if they were sending their aid into certain parts of Somalia, then the big international agencies funded by the USA and Europe could legitimately suggest they were providing aid to terrorist organizations, and politics started to play into humanitarian response. It becomes incredibly complex. And we will take you through some of these challenges as case studies to adjust your reference frame and your thinking around these crises. Disasters happen at home. This is Grenfell. This was a crisis in a high income setting. But how did we respond to that? And some of you may have been watching the news. We're Manchester based. I was involved in the Manchester bombing response, and there's a huge public inquiry going on there about the emergency services responses to a high income setting disaster. But with respect to the Grenfell fire, what about the social determinants of health? Who was affected in Grenfell fire? Was it your average British citizen? Or was it largely an immigrant population, a lower social income population, a population dependent on social security? How well were they educated? What was their English like? What was their healthcare like? What were their social networks like? The impact of social status, the anthropology of the population is really important. And it's not just global south, predictable disasters. You need to understand the breadth of the response to prepare and mitigate for disaster. And disasters are increasingly taking place in conflict-affected areas. There are all sorts of compounding factors. And the NGOs, the humanitarian agencies, have a really difficult relationship with the host military and with the logistics, supply chains to responding to disasters, because quite often the logistics are provided by military aircraft. And those military aircraft may not be welcome in parts of the country you're trying to respond to. It gets really difficult. And I've alluded to displaced populations. Displaced populations, we tend to regard them as other. We don't see them as ourselves. And it's really important to try and understand the behaviors of populations and why people do what they do. They're not just financial migrants. Some are, but often they are perfectly regular, ordinary people, and moving en masse is the logical thing to do. And asking them to stay put and trying to help them to stay in refugee camps. Would you, if that was you and your family? And it's really important to understand the dynamics around that, because they're normal people and they want our global help. And then there's the natural disasters. This comes from UK Med's deployment to the Maru River region in 2013-15 for the Ebola outbreak. And we learned some incredible lessons about how to respond to the societies that were being affected. And to put it in context, it's estimated that the health development of Sierra Leone was set back 20 years by the Ebola outbreak. And that was because they were already short of health workers, doctors and nurses. And so many of those doctors and nurses died in the response. They've lost 2 decades of health response. So there's the actual response and there's the building back and the strategic positioning to help the disaster mitigation. And all of that we will cover in some of our modules. Okay. I alluded to learning the lessons. We are in a dynamic, moving environment. Last year, the UN celebrated its 75th year. You may well know about the Sustainable Development Goals. And think, well, that's development, that's not disaster response. But actually it is. If you have a developed population, a developed system with emergency capacity, it is much better able to deal with the problems and issues that it faces when they come. And right now, in many parts of sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, the COVAX system is benefiting from the health system developments that have been going on as part of the MDG journey, and we're 5 years into the SDG journey 6 years into the SDG journey. We need to look at emergency capacity and response capacity and help the system better develop. So that's why you should do disaster management. It's about HCRI. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty about you're on our program. I'm Director of Online Programs. I look after all 3 of our online programs at the moment. And what I want from you, if you come to us, is 15 hours a week. It's a lot. This is a Russell Group University, top-tier university, and you're wanting a master's program from us. That requires commitment. It's asynchronous learning. We have people who are on shift work, who are doing this part-time. We have people from across the world in different time zones. Same time, same place, each week, being in front of your computer is not practical. So it's asynchronous. There is content each week, but you can dip into it and do the work when you have the opportunity, when you're able. And we have directed group discussions that run on a week-by-week basis. So each week you will enter, there is due content for you to see. There are videos and readings for you to watch and read. There are challenges put up and you mount your views and you enter into a discussion. We trigger those discussions. You respond to those discussions, both to the module conveners, the teachers, and to your peers. And you have moderated group discussions about the content that's being delivered. And the reading of the material, the watching of the videos, and the engagement in discussion, it's about 15 hours a week. You will do your studies in modules. A module is 8 weeks of this weekly extra content. And then when the module finishes, there is 1 week to finish off the final assessment of that module. So the module runs for 9 weeks. I schedule a week's break at Christmas and a week's break at Easter, but in essence, you will do 4 modules in an academic year. We start at the end of September and you will run through to early June, module 1, 2, 3, 4. You will then be reviewed by the exam board and move into your next academic year. Now we do have entries in September, and we also have an entry in February, and then you would do 3, 4, 1, 2. So we are set up to run starting twice a year. People always ask about the cost. A master's at a UK university costs £10,000 if you're a UK citizen. If you're an international student, it's at 20,000, and it's charged at because it's over 3 years, it's charged a third each year. Of course, there is inflationary increase, but your costs are pegged at the cost when you entered. So if you enter in year 1, it will be 10K. If you enter in 2 years' time, it will be 10,000 plus 2 years of inflation, and it will be pegged at that rate. And that's how it works for all University of Manchester online programs. If you are a British citizen, you will have no problems with English language fluency, but we do have quite a number of Commonwealth and international students who want to come with us. In some of your modules, you will be working alongside global health students and humanitarian practice students. You will find yourself in classrooms with nurses who are in Namibia or in South Sudan. You will find yourself with humanitarian practitioners who are in Jordan or in Cox's Bazar or in Somalia, and they will be doing their online studies alongside you. And that I find it makes it a really enriching and exciting discussion board environment, because people are telling you about what they saw last week or what they've been doing. And the last one was about, you may have seen the fires in the refugee camps in Cox's Bazar, and a number of our students were talking to us about some of the difficulties they were facing. with the management of the already displaced Rohingya in the refugee camps in Cox's Bazar when the health system, in essence, burnt down. A number of people died. An awful lot of the community health work that was ongoing was completely decapitated, and they were having to rebuild the community health systems. And they were talking to us about that almost real time, a really exciting thing to be part of. If you are non-English speaking, we require an IELTS grade of 7 with a minimum writing score of 7. It's about how you can express yourself. There are lots of different grading systems, but because of COVID, some of the international students have been unable to get to a British Council centre to undo their tests. So we have introduced an English language waiver process, and the admissions team will take you through that if you need it. So what about the programme? We are part-time, 15 hours a week. You will do 4 modules in your first year. A module is 15 credits. 4 times 15 is 60 credits, and you could exit with a postgrad certificate. If you choose to carry on, you will do another 4 modules. You will then have 120 credits, and you would be eligible to exit with a diploma at the end of year 2. If you then wanted to go on to your full masters, and of course you're applying for your masters, you would enter year 3, which is the dissertation year. So you would do 8 taught modules in sequence and then enter your dissertation. Now, remember when I was talking about the 8 modules and the core and the flexibility, as it stands today, this is what you would start in September. You would start with risk, vulnerability and resilience, which is quantitative research. You would then do a module on emergency humanitarian assistance, which would be led by me, which is about responding, then about disaster preparedness, about resilience, and you would finish your year with community approaches to health, about health system strengthening, and that's your certificate year. You would then move into your diploma year, and we look at reconstruction, managing the mental health and psychosocial support of the populations, HCR inquiries, analysis, and the research methods is qualitative research. And that's what it looks like today. The core modules are quantitative research, qualitative research, analysis, and responding. And I'm hoping that over the next academic year, we will be able to drop in some optional modules, and you could perhaps swap out the mental health for one of the other HCRI modules. This is a moving feast. I was hoping I would be able to give you a solid answer today, but I'd ask you to bear in mind the university is returning to campus after COVID, and we're realigning ourselves and trying to work out how much we can deliver in what timescale to the original plans that we set out when we set this degree rolling, because this flexibility, which we already have in humanitarian practice, is rolling out to global health and disaster management. I wanted it for this September, but it's been delayed, and I'm hoping I can get it to you this academic year, so you'll start to choose your modules. Watch this space. But this is the standard that the university gave us their blessing on when we started the degree, and we're trying to broaden it out for you to give you a broader base. Once you've done your 8 modules, you enter the dissertation. Really important for you to understand, it is a student-generated research question. You will enter the dissertation module over the first 8 weeks, where we will help you create and refine a research question. Think about the ethics and be allocated a supervisor. You then work with that supervisor over the following months to create your dissertation, your thesis. You can do primary research, but you can also do secondary data research. We have links to the International Federation of the Red Cross and to MSF, And it may well be that your thesis will be using data that's already been captured rather than you having to capture that primary data. About 2/3 of our students choose to do secondary literature analysis, not to take primary data or secondary data research, but actually take a new look at secondary literature and create a different perspective. So some require to do primary, some master's programs require to do primary research, and that's all you can do. We are much more flexible, and we will engage the conversation with you about doing your thesis that's relevant and of interest to you, and we will help you shape this question into something that you can get your passion up about, that gets your juices flowing for what is an 11-month process from beginning to end to submit your dissertation to get your master's at the end of the program. We offer a consistent approach in Blackboard where we have a notice board, a module content, reading list and access to the University of Manchester John Rylands Library, the discussion board and learning journal. The discussion board is where you're engaging with all your peers, the learning journal where you're engaging with the tutor. Of course, there has to be assessment. I'm sorry about that. And then there's the full access to the University of Manchester learning support systems. So you would be able to access almost all library sources through John Rylands. John Rylands is one of the 4 large libraries that have access to everything in the UK. And if they don't have immediate access, they will get it to you from the British Library. But we also have writing support, IT support, and all the software system supports that you would need to be able to do your studies, distance learning, online. We do offer synchronous meetings. We are moving to offering some tutorials, but we do have some real time zone challenges, and part-time students are often working on shifts. So what I currently do in my modules is offer a 1-hour face-to-face webinar seminar every 2 weeks during the 8 weeks of the module, and we record it. And then we upload the recording into Blackboard so those who couldn't join can drop in, and we take questions and we have a conversation about things. But it's not core, it's not mandated, your attendance isn't recorded. It seems to work far better for the dissertations. I've had students who have been joining our group discussions at 3 o'clock in the morning from New Zealand, while I've got students at 7 o'clock in the morning in the Caribbean. So we do that. And in dissertations, perhaps it's because we focus their minds on their dissertation, they do join us, but it's not mandated. University rules: certificate 60, diploma 120, full masters 180 credits. There is a 5-year maximum from the date you enter to when you must graduate, but life gets in the way. There are interruptions, there are life challenges. We endeavour to be as flexible as we can be. I am the program director. I'm not currently planning on going anywhere, so you will be working with me, and if you needed to interrupt or step off for a period, it'd be me you're dealing with, and we would bend over backwards to try and make it work for you. My favourite interruption, and I'll share it with you, is a lady who was doing our global health program in her dissertation and said, I'm going to have to interrupt because I'm 3 months pregnant, but let me get my proposal forward and then I'll interrupt before I return. And she disappeared and then sent me an email saying, I'm going to have to interrupt. And I said, explain. She sent a picture of a premature baby in an incubator and a birth certificate, and there was absolutely no issue in getting her an interruption for 9 months. It's just my favourite story, a good reason for interruption. The university couldn't really argue with that one, but we've had an awful lot of interruptions because of COVID and because of professional exams and people changing jobs. talk to us ahead of time, and we will bend over backwards to make it work through me as the program director. Our graduates come from around the world, and I put this one up from the last graduation ceremony we had: USA, Germany, and an emergency consultant from London all came to Manchester for their glass of incredibly expensive champagne. Where do our people go? All over the place. Our students are working with Oxfam, Red Cross, Save the Children, MSF. Some go into government functions with civil service. Some go on think tanks like the Overseas Development Institute or the Centre for Global Development. They work with international institutions, some with the UN, some part of peacekeeping, and some work with the AU, the EU. I know one has gone to the Organization of American States from the Caribbean, but basically, I just want to give you a flavor. Our students go across the piece from the distance learning programs at HCRI. Obviously, our Masters in Disaster Management is only in its second year now, so this is distance learning more broadly. So I've whittled on for long enough. I'm going to pause and ask for your questions, and I'm sure that Lucy will have them lined up. Okay, so Alicia's dropped out, which is fine. Do I have any advice for students undecided between disaster management and global health? Okay. It really depends on what you see yourself doing. I am very happy if you want to approach us through the online at manchester.ac.uk, and I can then enter in a direct conversation with individual students to help you choose. Because I'm a practicing emergency physician and I came in through global health, that's my baby and I'm most proud of it. But I've also done a lot of emergency planning and disaster management with the Department of Health in Whitehall, and I am equally passionate about disaster management. I've done some of the work in Geneva with the emergency medical teams. Indeed, that's what brought me full-time to the university. So I think it really depends on what your career aspirations are, and I'd encourage you to have a one-to-one. Some of the modules are the same: risk, vulnerability, resilience, research methods, and community approaches to health are common. Emergency humanitarian assistance, humanitarian conflict response inquiries, and mental health are unique to disaster management and are not currently available to global health. As I said, I'm aspiring to allow module choice flexibility so you could pick and choose. But what the university will want you to have is a primary theme. Okay. Okay. I'm just looking at the list. Total change in career, no experience in the area, but very interested. Absolutely. We have some students who come to us with some background, but we do take people who are coming with nothing at all. Indeed, we do have some students who haven't done an undergraduate, completed an undergraduate program. We recognize their professional experience. There's a couple of extra hurdles too, but they demonstrate their academic ability, and we will bring them in to join our programs. Humanitarian practice requires field experience, but global health and disaster management, you can come with no prior experience in these fields. Why 3 years over 2 years? Because we've got so much to get through, and the way our modules are structured, it takes 3 years at Manchester in HCRI. The amount of academic credit you get is the same. You can do a full-time master's at Manchester in 1 year, but you would need to be on campus, and you would be doing 60 credits, 4 modules at once during semester 1, 4 modules at once during semester 2, and you would be developing and doing your dissertation over the top of that. It really is intense. This is part-time, it's spread out, and we only get you doing one module at once to try help you manage your workload. Okay. Will you track a similar group of students if you start in September? Because of the interruptions, etc., and students dipping in and out from different modules, there is some change each module, but you will get to see the same names and you will track some students. And I would estimate, based on the size of our cohorts, there are going to be about 10 or 15 students that you will be with in most modules. But some of the names you'll see 4 or 5 times, and some of the modules, certainly my emergency humanitarian assistance module, is common to all 3. It's common to humanitarian practice and disaster management, and some of our on-campus students do it too. It's all distance learning, but the on-campus students do the distance learning, and there can be 60 students in that cohort. So there'll be a small group that you transit through most modules with, and then some of the modules have extras added into. So yes, peer support. We are very open to suggestions about how we do peer support better. I have been concerned about how we can provide that. I am open to all suggestions and ideas from students about how we do that better. Field experience during the duration of the course. With distance learning, it's a challenge. We do, for the on-campus students in a non-COVID environment, we have student credit where they can travel to India and they travel to northern Uganda. Those are the 2 placement areas we currently have for our on-campus students. We do not yet have the distance learning students joining it, but there is no reason why they could not. And we are open to facilitating that. That would have extra cost because you'd have to pay your travel fees and your accommodation, etc. But there is no reason why, with the flexibility we're trying to introduce, you couldn't do some of those field trips that the on-campus students do. Now, obviously, we're in the middle of COVID. It's illegal to travel to many places from the UK at the moment, either leave the UK or come or enter some of those countries. But I'm hoping that by next summer, things will be settling down and we'll be in a better place. So yes, the options are there. Head Start in humanitarians of work. Yes. How would it lead into avenues of work? You would be networking with humanitarians from Save the Children, particularly from MSF. I can tell you today there are 252 students doing distance learning programs, and about 143 of them are MSF students. So you would be able to, you'll be working with and studying with students who are in the NGOs, and we have partnerships with people like Red Cross. I'm in conversation with the High Commission for Refugees in Geneva and with the Federation of the Red Cross, and we network. I have one student who's leaving our program, graduating our program, who's going to be going to work with MSF UK in London when they finish, and we made those connections. So I can't show you a rich track record because some of our programs, our first students are just coming out to the end of, but we have facilitated that for those students that have asked. Okay, Lucy's typing things in and answer to people at the same time as I'm answering the questions. So let me make sure I'm not missing any. Okay. Talked about the field experience, Head Start in humanitarian areas. As I said, we have lots of networks. Okay, Lucy's just asked somebody whether they've had their question answered. I've answered all the questions. Oh, there we go. Because this is being recorded, I'm being deliberately anonymous. So you know that, but let's read that question. Great interest in applying for study for this master's. Do not claim the academic requirements may be considered. Yes, we do. Particular background, you have a BSc. You are ticking the boxes. You would be considered suitable. So the person who's got the BSc in applied computing and GIS, absolutely, you tick our boxes for entry to disaster management. Okay. As I said, for individuals, if you want to have a one-to-one conversation, I'm very happy to have that. Okay. Now, when you get to the end of one of these webinars and you've been wittering on for a good while, yeah, okay, fair question. What kind of work would it qualify you for? Because not practical skills, more overview of management and leadership. Now, NFGO, I don't recognize as an acronym. NGO is a non-governmental organization. That person, if you're not talking about NGOs, just drop that into the chat so I can see which sort of organization you're referring to. And I'll talk more generally. NGOs. Fat finger moment. Thank you. Just before I entered this webinar, I was talking to an evaluator who's looking at our LEAP program, our humanitarian practice program, evaluating how the academic study helps people professionally in NGOs, particularly for this one with MSF. And very specifically, it's about levels of thinking, strategic views, understanding of the narrative, what happens in disasters. I talked dismissively of lessons learned and the fact we never learn them. We certainly identify lessons, and understanding those and having a strategic understanding of how the different organizations interact together and work together and what's worked in the past and what hasn't is what the NGOs are wanting when they're buying in to these development programs for their staff. The emergency humanitarian assistance module is practical skills. Now, difficult to teach practical skills, how to sterilize your water, distance learning, but this is about how much food do you need, how much water do you need, how much poo does a person produce each day, and when you've got 10,000 in a camp, how do you deal with it? How do you deliver healthcare in a crisis? How do you manage the mental health care of a displaced population? That's emergency humanitarian assistance. Those are pretty practical skills, and that's what my EHA module in your certificate year will provide. So I completely take the critique that's provided about we're not teaching the practical skills, but you know what? The Red Cross came back and said, we don't want you to teach them how to do it. We want them to know how important it is. And then when they come to us as their pre-deployment training, we'll teach them how to do it with our kit. What we need them to know is how to think about the problems and how to see what's coming down the line and how to report what they're seeing so we can better manage the disaster. And to the person that asked that question, you're absolutely right, but there is theoretical knowledge and there's practical skills, and the NGOs do it their way. And they are really keen to teach people how to do it their way in their pre-deployment training. The lectures are pre-recorded. Nothing is more than 20 minutes at a time because people have a limited time span. There is, as I said, 15 hours of study per week. The lectures are pre-recorded because they're asynchronous. As I said to you, the live stuff is every fortnight. There is a 1-hour seminar where you come together. But in terms of one-to-one, we are trying to offer academic advisors support to students with academic advisors that are part of HCRI, and you schedule those and you get a dreaded Zoom call just like this, where we can do some one-to-one support if you need it. The idea, some of our people are deployed in the field, and we provide the links and the connections so they can download it and take their laptop with them and be disconnected for a week or two and come back, upload their content and still be on track with their studies. And we've done that for a number of people a number of times via pre-arrangement. It's just the way we do it. If you have a particularly high level qualification, is it okay for an MSc? Yes, it absolutely is. We're in the School of Arts, Languages and Culture, and we offer an MSc. That really sets the head of school as a challenge. It's an MSc because there's lots of science-based rather than arts-based. But if you have the academic skills that you describe in your message, you would have no challenge. Yes, there's a little bit of mathematics. Yes, there's a little bit of statistics, but it's at a basic level. It's not at a, here is SPSS, enter your data into SPSS and provide me with an appropriate quantitative statistical analysis. We're not asking you to do that. We're saying to you, here is the data. This is why we do absolute risk. This is why we do relative risk. This is what it means. And this is how you would map an epidemic outbreak. This is how you would map a population and a trajectory. We're not asking you to do the maths. We're asking you to look at the maths and be able to understand what it's saying. I'm seeing two questions. Lucy, can you deal with the question about EU students? Thank you, because that's an admissions process. Another student is a BA in education and okay academic background. If it's a UK degree, absolutely. If it's a degree from another recognised institution, it would be absolutely fine. If it's from a university that we wouldn't recognise, we would ask for a reference as well. But yes, a BA in education is highly likely. Working as a teacher and tutor in English, maths and science up to GCSE level. If you're a teacher teaching at GCSE level, you are more than capable of delivering for our disaster management programme. Okay. Lucy, I'm going to assume you've taken that question about EU fees. Thank you. We've answered that question live. Now, when they did my training in how to be an educator, they say, has anybody got any more questions? And you count slowly to 10. And I'm going to say to you all, have you any more questions? And I'm going to count slowly to 10. Question, can you access all resources, books, periodicals digitally? Yes, full stop. Do you need to buy books? No, full stop. But I am in the process of working on a textbook on emergency humanitarian assistance. So I'd like you to buy my book, but it's not been written and published yet. No, to the student that asked that, you can access all resources you need digitally through the university library, and that's part of what you get as the programme. Okay. I'm going to make the assumption that if there were any further questions, you would have had time to type them by now. Can I remind you all, if you have further questions, if you want a one-to-one conversation with me, if you email online at manchester.ac.uk, I am very happy to schedule a one-to-one with anybody and answer their specific questions. Can I thank everybody for their time? I hope you got what you need. If it's a positive, great. We'll be talking online. If it's told you everything you need and we're not the right fit for you, I'm very happy to help direct you elsewhere. We're not right for everybody, but let us help you find what's right for you. Thank you, everybody, for your time. See you in the virtual space. Thank you.